You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth!
Hey everybody, it's Brian Burns and welcome to this episode of the Brutal Truth About Sales and Selling podcast. Today you got a great topic, how to get out of your comfort zone. Guess what? If you're in sales, our comfort zone, we don't get to stay there very often, do we? We're often pushed out and need to be. We need to assert ourselves, call people, email people, present to people, do public speaking, talk to complete strangers. A lot of things that become uncomfortable, traveling, being into new places, being under pressure a lot, asking for things from people constantly within our company. This is what we do all day, and it's still uncomfortable. But then there's the other things, the big things, that big meeting, that big deal that you're trying to get through, the first time you present in front of a board of directors or in front of a CEO or in front of your CEO and presenting your quarterly business plan. All of these things that we have to do and get out of our comfort zone. Today, I have an author of a book called Reach, Anthony Molinsky, from Brandeis University. Super smart guy, super nice guy. I found him on YouTube. I think his book is great. His approach is a lot better than the walking on fire. The take the big leap, jump out of the plane, get up at 4 a.m. and run into the ocean. It's a little bit more scientific and realistic, I think, and something that we all can relate to. So he's going to break it down into 3 steps, but I do encourage you to get the book, Reach, because it really is something that we got to become good at, and something that certainly I had to become better at, and try and practice every day a little bit. So let's get into it, and before we do, make sure you're checking out Discover.org. They've got some great ebooks that they're doing with great research about cold calling and matching up your ideal customer profile, as well as Nudge just released their kind of all-in-one account-based selling capability that's just automatic for you. I'll be doing a video on it shortly. Here we go with Anthony. Hey, Andy, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, tell us about yourself.
Sure. Yeah. So let's see. By day, I'm a professor at Brandeis International Business School in the Business School and Psychology Department, and my background's organizational behavior. But by night, not always by night, but my other hat, I would say, is that I'm an author of some popular business books. I write for Harvard Business Review. I do consulting and keynote speaking and all sorts of things related to topics around stepping outside your comfort zone, stepping outside your cultural comfort zone, those kinds of topics in order to grow and learn and develop and achieve the success that you deserve to achieve. So that's me in a nutshell.
And how'd you get into this?
Well, the way I got into the question is I guess what this is. If this is the field,
it's talking about getting out of your comfort zone.
Yeah. So that in particular, it's a topic that's always fascinated me because it's always been something I've struggled with. When I open keynotes, when I do, a lot of keynotes, and I open these, my talks usually with a sort of a confessional that, here I am, the guy talking to you about how to step outside your comfort zone, but hey, I'm not so good at it. I've struggled with it too, whether it's public speaking or networking or, when I became an author, a published author, I very soon learned I needed to do social media and sort of develop a following, so to speak, and sales and so on. And that was always outside my comfort zone. But so I feel like, it's something that I've always struggled with. And so I've always been really interested in it. And I think a lot of people, at least in academics, writers, oftentimes delve into the things that challenge them personally. And so that's, I think, where it comes from.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. But what was the inflection point in your life when you kind of either recognized that you had to do something about this or you wouldn't live the life that you wanted? Was it in high school, college, after that?
I would say it's when I'd say there was no sort of key sort of moment, in time I think oftentimes we reconstruct our lives to see it in terms of like that pivotal moment. But for me, I don't see there was a pivotal moment, but I did see as I started to build my career, maybe about 20, 25 years ago. I got a PhD, but I'm an academic and I write, papers for other academics and so on, but I was never fully satisfied with that. I always wanted to be able to reach people who were, professionals, not academics, people who, where I could try to help them live more successful, effective, fulfilling lives. But I realized early on that I was going to need to do things that were outside my comfort zone to achieve that. I was going to need to start to meet people, network, give speeches, and so on, and speak with corporate audiences. And I think that if anything was an inflection point, that was it, because I was pretty sheltered in my academic world. And so those are very different worlds. And I think that was a moment where I was like, I'm going to have to really figure this stuff out.
Well, that's it, because I see all too often is there's these great authors who take work that's done by academics and build beautiful stories around them and give attribution to the creator of the studies and everything, but they live and nobody remembers the academic. They remember the Malcolm Gladwell. I mean, if you said, who discovered the 10,000 hour rule, no one's going to say that study, because no one can remember it, right?
Exactly. Another one is emotional intelligence. A lot of people attribute it to Dan Goleman, who is he's a journalist. He actually has a PhD, I'm pretty sure, but he's a journalist. And he's not the one who developed the concepts around emotional intelligence, but he's the one who popularized it. So, no, you're right. Absolutely. Malcolm Gladwell and others. I think they're great storytellers. I always wanted to be a storyteller, not just a storyteller. I always wanted to be able to come up with tools and insights and frameworks to be able to actually impact people's lives. So just be beyond telling stories, training and so on. And so, I realized that for me to be able to do that, I was going to have to start to step outside my own comfort zone in a variety of ways. So that's what I've done.
And you have a very unique take on it. I mean, because the popular technique is kind of like the Tony Robbins approach, or you listen to the motivational videos on YouTube. It's, you got to get up at 4 a.m. and dive into the ocean.
Take a cold shower.
Take a cold shower, eat some raw eggs. And your approach is a little bit different. And how'd you come up with this? What was the process?
Yeah, so it's a make your bed every morning. I heard that was one. So what I've done to come up with this is research. I was trained as a researcher, and so I interviewed 70 to 80 people cross professions about situations that they've encountered in their lives, stepping outside their comfort zone. Managers, doctors, police officers, therapists, actors, students, priests, rabbis, even a goat farmer, entrepreneurs, all sorts of people. And it wasn't just interviews. I also did firsthand observations. For example, with the police officers, I did a ride along where I went in the back of the cop car for a day where 2 police officers evicted 20 people or families from their homes throughout the day. And I got to see what that was like. And, people often don't realize it, but that's really outside the officers' comfort zones to do those things. It's not easy. So my point is that I did a lot of research, a lot of interviews. And I also created a course here at Brandeis International Business School where I teach, where I force, I guess I feel bad when I'm saying force, but it's true. If you take the course, this is the requirement that I have students, and these are, 20 to 30-year-old students. They have to choose a situation outside their comfort zone, and they have to go off and do it. Yeah. And we have a whole process where I teach them and train them, and they reflect on it and so on. But I've observed that throughout the years, and throughout all this stuff, all this data, that's where I came up with these ideas. So they don't just come out of the blue, and they're very focused on specific situations. So it's focused on public speaking or networking or being assertive or pitching and promoting yourself or making small talk with someone you don't know or speaking up at a meeting. I think that you get the most leverage leverage by focusing really concretely on situations, as opposed to, get up in the morning and take a shower. And, those aren't bad things. You do want to take a shower, but so I don't know if it's going to be as targeted towards helping you as you'd like.
And that's it, because like the Tony Robbins walking on fire thing, where that there's like this exact moment where you have fear and you overcome your fear. That's not really how it works, is it? Or
I don't know. I don't want to speak for him, and I don't want to speak for everyone. So you often hear, and if you Google comfort zone on the internet, you'll see people talking about taking a leap. You got to take a leap, taking a leap. People jumping out of planes, jumping off cliffs, and so on, and even a fish jumping out of a fishbowl. Taking a leap is actually critical. And in fact, in my book, I talk about how important it is, because if you can take a leap, in other words, try something, that's when you benefit from self-discovery. And you oftentimes will discover that it isn't as hard as you thought it was, and actually that you're better at it than you thought you were, which ends up, really being a very powerful learning. But the point is that people don't take a leap spontaneously most of the time by snapping your fingers and saying, I'm going to do this, and go off and do it. It's a process. And in fact, it's not only a process, but it's a process that benefits from insight and awareness into the challenges and actual tools that you can use to try to nudge yourself to be able to take that leap. And that part is what I focus on in my work.
And how much of that is science versus art?
Well, it's based in science, but even science is art. I mean, and we're getting really esoteric here, but science is art in a way. Like if you talk to any scientists, there's an art to science. Yeah, so right, it's so I mean that's a whole other discussion. But I think that I think there is science in the sense that there's a scientific basis to what I'm talking about. But the art, I think, is in the application. And what I mean by that is that there's no one-size-fits-all version of this, right? I think that's when people say art, usually I think what they're really saying is sort of like customizability.
Right. Because I look at like, because I always have the analogy of sales is a lot like cooking. Because you could think that cooking is science, right? It's chemistry, it's ingredients, it's heat, it's mixing. But yet every chef in the world, great chef, has their own cookbook out there, and yet no one can replicate their dishes, right? There's something else that's missing there. There's that little gap or style or, and it's like telling a joke, We both of us could tell Chris Rock's joke, but no one would laugh, right?
Yeah, it's true. There's I think that comes from practice too, and that's why it's so important to get yourself out there. Another benefit of giving something a try and continually giving something a try. I think there's something about implicit knowledge that's hard to codify. In other words, codification is when you put something in a recipe, but there's implicit knowledge that is kind of impossible to codify, right? They're judgment calls. I happen to love cooking, so they're judgment calls when you're cooking, right? Often, all the time, judgment calls. There's creativity, micro creativity throughout the process of cooking. I was cooking with my daughter last night. I was noticing this, tasting, adjusting, having a sense of how something might look. No, you shouldn't use that pan. No, you should try this. Oh, wait a second. Smart, informed improvisation in some ways, even within the context of a recipe. And I think that's a good analogy, actually, for adapting and adjusting outside your comfort zone, for sure. But you can't become a cook by watching Food Network. You can become a cook you can get inspired to cook by watching Food Network, but you have to actually go off there and do it. Yeah,
you do. And that's the part that's hard, right? That's the part, right?
It's so nice to sit on the couch and watch someone, cook, or on HGTV, watch someone renovate a house in 45 minutes.
Right, and even your example of being in the backseat of that police car, watching that on cops on TV is one level. You being in the back seat, I'm sure you had empathy for both people, the people getting evicted and the people, the police officers having to do it.
Oh yeah, it's funny. I didn't enter the situation with much empathy for the police officers, but I left the situation with a lot of empathy for them.
Right, because they're not getting any joy out of this. And,
no,
they're not. they're helping the bank maybe or the landlord, but and it has to be done, but they're not, saving lives. They're not, protecting people. It's just something that has to be done.
Exactly. A necessary evil.
Yeah. But, how does a guy like you get into Harvard and get a PhD without being able to get out of your comfort zone?
Well, I've been able to get out of my comfort zone. I don't think that that's not accurate. It's just that I've always found it hard to do.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not that I haven't been outside my comfort zone. So that's one thing. How does a guy like me get into Harvard and do a PhD? I don't know. You have to ask them. I don't know. I actually love my time there. I
didn't mean it from an academic point. I meant it more from it takes a lot, right? I mean, right?
Yeah, it does. It's true. It's true. It
takes stretching, right? Doing a lot of things that you probably didn't feel like doing.
That's true. I would say that is true. I think that there's, but it's within the same field, right? From kindergarten, I've been in the academic world, so to speak, right?
You were comfortable in that.
Yeah, and to some degree, right? So there are different tasks, different challenges getting a PhD versus graduating from kindergarten, but it's in the
crayons, yeah.
Right. It's in the academic orbit versus, going into a corporation. For me, at least, there's very different things people are interested in. There's a different language, there's a different logic and so on. And 20 years ago, now I feel comfortable in that environment. But sort of a comfortable outsider. But initially I didn't. It was well outside my comfort zone. I remember avoiding it. I remember early on, I was asked early on in my career to give keynotes at companies, and not because I was great, I think, but because I was a professor at the time at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles, and some big companies were looking for keynote speakers. And gosh, I remember just avoiding it. I told them I was busy when I was definitely not busy. It was so outside my comfort zone that it was in the panic zone, and I fully avoided it. Now, I go for these. I really enjoy doing these. To some degree, sometimes they're outside my comfort zone, depending on what it is. But it's an exciting, interesting stretch as opposed to something that's terrifying.
And do you practice at becoming like the skill of it? Because you look at the keynote speakers, right? And some of them have depth to them, yet some of them have entertaining skills to them. Right. You see them on YouTube, on the TED Talks and things like that, where, I don't want to call anybody out, but, where there's clearly no depth in the understanding of the science that they're presenting, but they're very good communicators.
Yeah, they call it edutainment, right? that is a skill. To present something that's scientifically solid, but at the same time engaging and entertaining. And you don't want to fall off either side of the balance beam, right? You don't want to present something that has no scientific or intellectual merit to it. At the same time, you don't want to present something that's high on intellectual and scientific merit, but that bores people. Right. And the reason being is that they're not going to benefit from it. So it's because they're not going to engage with it. So I think there's a real talent in trying to blend the two. And I guess in some ways, for me at least, I think being a professor in a business school for so long has forced me to learn to do that intuitively, because that's exactly what I need to do every single week of my life.
Right. I mean, because you're teaching stuff that is hard to communicate, isn't it? Organization.
Yeah, you have to. You have to be able to engage, whether it's an undergraduate who has never stepped foot in a company, and you have to you have to bring these concepts to life in a way that are going to inspire and sort of light a fire in someone versus someone who has had experience, let's say an older MBA student or an executive education participant who like maybe comes and says, sort of comes with the attitude of like, what can you teach me? Whatever it is, you've got to present something that's going to connect with them, that's going to hit a pain point that they care about, that they're motivated to learn from, that has some scientific basis to it, and kind of bring them along and establish a relationship with them, just like you'd establish a relationship with the audience. And all this is, and you have to do it in a way that's authentic to you. You can't fake it.
Right.
You have to really, and so all this together makes it challenging to do. But I guess for me, at least, for me personally, I've done this for 25 years. So it in some ways it's second nature to me. But I think it's not such an easy task.
And are there like a recipe, scientific steps that work ideally for people? Or does it vary based off of, their level of either shyness, introvertedness, extrovertedness?
Yeah. So in terms of stepping outside your comfort zone, what I've found in my work is that there are a couple of really important things to think about. One thing is to try to understand where your challenges come from. Like, why is it hard? Of course it's hard. Why? And so I found, for instance, in my book Reach, I talk about this, the idea that there are 5 core challenges that people often experience, whether it's, to your sense of authenticity, this doesn't feel like me, whatever you're doing outside your comfort zone. And that can be really anxiety provoking. Likability. I worry people won't like this version of me, and that makes me reticent to do it. Competence. I'm afraid I'm going to look like a fool, feel like a fool. Resentment. Deep down, logically, you need to do whatever it is and whatever it happens to be outside your comfort zone, but maybe psychologically you feel resentful about it. Morality. You feel that you're doing something wrong when stepping outside your comfort zone. I actually opened my book Reach with a story of a young woman who started a company, an entrepreneur, and she had to end up firing her best friend a couple months in. So, the first step that I think is really key is to be able to kind of diagnose and understand name your pain points, because I think that ultimately gives you a little bit of control if you can sort of name something in a way and normalize it, that you're not the only one. So that's I find that is one step that's really key.
And then what do you do after that?
Well, after that, what I help people do is I help people apply some tools that I found to be very successful among the folks that I have worked with and have interviewed. And I found 3 key tools. One's called conviction. In other words, to step outside your comfort zone, which is quite simply having locating and embracing your deep sense of purpose for why. Remember, this is outside your comfort zone. Why is it worth it for you to do this? It's like an antidote to avoidance in a way. It's almost like giving yourself psychological permission to do something that just feels on some level either wrong or deeply uncomfortable or whatever it might be. And, that source of conviction can be so different for different people. Maybe it's the right thing for you to do. Maybe you realize it will make you feel good about yourself. Maybe it will enable you to help others. And that's what drives you. I mean, whatever it is, find it, embrace it. It's actually quite a powerful, very powerful resource. So that was conviction. The second thing is what I call customization, which I actually was probably the most surprising thing I found, and I kept seeing it, and it was really interesting. People were tweaking how they performed. The successful people were finding a way to tweak whatever it was to make it fit them a little bit better, make it feel just a little bit more comfortable for them. It could be changing their body language. It could be changing their actual language, kind of scripting or, using certain words or not using other words, staging the context. In other words, I don't know, someone might choose to, if they have to do a speaking engagement, they might ask if it's possible to do a Q&A instead of a stage speech because they feel very uncomfortable with a stage speech but feel very themselves in a Q&A. Could be a prop. I used to, it could be a power suit or I don't know. I used to wear a ring whenever I spoke early on, and I was very uncomfortable speaking. And the ring had a tiger's eye stone in the middle of the ring, and it's a stone. The stone itself is a stone my great uncle found on the beaches of the South Pacific in World War II, and he came back and had that stone made into a pretty simple silver ring that he always wore. And as a kid, I always saw it, and it was a really striking ring. Eventually, I inherited the ring. And once I sort of, as an adult, I learned where he got it and the story behind it. It started to represent courage for me in some way. And then when I was starting to do things professionally that were hard for me, I actually put two and two together and started wearing the ring. And I started thinking, it wasn't like a magic ring, but it was a ring that made me think about his situation, his courage. And I'd always say to myself, man, if he could do that, I can do this. And so it gave me a little nudge. And so, I mean, these are just examples, but there's a lot of, I think the bottom line is that when people are trying something outside their comfort zone, they often feel powerless. And I think people have more power than they think to kind of make something a little bit their own and therefore make it a little bit less hard.
So what I heard was kind of break it down, come up with a big why, which is to be the motive, have these anchors, these associations, these items that remind you of either other people coming over obstacles or you coming over obstacles in the past. It sounds a little like neurolinguistics programming. Did you do any research into that?
No, but people have mentioned that actually before. Yeah. It's not just right. It's interesting connection. It's there are a range of ways that people customized. And I'm not sure if I haven't delved deeply enough into neurolinguistic programming to see if it's fully consistent, but several people have mentioned that.
Yeah, I mean that it's everything's a little bit of everything, right?
Right.
But I think the breaking the things down into the smaller pieces is great because people look at it as just daunting. And I'm sure like your students do the first time they have to give a presentation in front of their class. It's what do most people pick in your class as far as something outside their comfort zone? Is there a common theme?
Yes, absolutely. Networking is like, I think is one of the hardest things for people because, it's not the only thing people choose, and I also have a lot of foreign-born students, and that makes it sort of doubly difficult because a lot of them.
Yeah.
No, it's not the language issue. Actually, they're pretty fluent in English. It's more the cultural issue that people come from more modest cultures where it's not acceptable to toot your own horn, where you wouldn't make, and this isn't modesty, but another aspect of the cultural differences is that it's a more hierarchical culture. You would never make small talk or initiate conversation in a lighthearted, casual way with someone above you in the hierarchy. And so think about yourself going to a networking event, walking up to a potential employee. Well, if it's sort of like a job hunting networking event, but even another kind of networking event, walking up to someone potentially more senior than you, looking at them in the eye, shaking their hand, telling them a bit about yourself in a sort of a way that kind of sells yourself a little bit. Those for a lot of people, native United States born people, those things are hard. But for people who come from cultures where those very behaviors would be inconsistent with the cultural norms, it's doubly hard. Yeah. Now, it depends, of course, on personality and your upbringing. And, not all cultures are the same. It's not true that everyone from India feels this way, although many people do. So there are a lot of contingencies here. But by and large, I'd say networking is a big one. Public speaking is another one. What are some other ones? Those are two. Being assertive, speaking your mind, speaking up, saying, standing up for your needs is a big one. I would say delivering bad news or delivering feedback is another one.
Yeah. Taking feedback's a second.
Taking feedback. It's interesting. People don't mention it, but I think that's also an important. It's an important skill.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's like sales managers rate it number one is the ability.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because
Wow.
what they want is, when salesperson does something wrong, to be able to take feedback so they can kind of move forward in their skill set. And this has been
Well, I think a lot of people take feedback as a blow to their self-esteem, when
Exactly.
in fact
Yeah.
it's better to take feedback ideally as data for improvement.
Exactly, right. But we're kind of wired as it being rejection, and when you look at the real tribal history of human beings, this all makes perfect sense because we all stayed in these small groups of people to survive, for
Right.
thousands of years, and so evolution would make our brains really focus on that. And today it's just the opposite. We're all out, visible in the world online.
Right, exactly.
Hey, this has been a great conversation. Where do people go to get the book, learn about your other work, and connect with you?
Yeah, no, I love connecting with folks, and I have a website which is www.andymolinsky, not surprisingly, .com, and my name's spelled ANDYMOLINSKY. I have all sorts of resources. I write for the Harvard Business Review, Inc.com, Psychology Today. I've got all sorts of videos and cheat sheets and self-assessment tools, and feel free to visit, connect with me on social. And, I'd love to keep in touch. In terms of the books, they're available, anywhere books are sold, Amazon, and, and so the two books are Reach, which came out last year with Penguin Random House, and then Global Dexterity, if you're interested in crossing cultures. That's through Harvard Business Review Press in 2013.
Yeah, I think this is all something we all can relate to, certainly in sales, from interviews to sales calls to end of the quarter pressure. We're constantly being pushed, or should be, outside of our comfort zone. And then our comfort zone expands. So the three things that I took away from it is think through it. Try and understand and rationalize that it's really not that bad. It's really, millions of people have done it before. You can do it. It's just little baby steps. Number two is come up with your why. The bigger your why, and you have to kind of define it, picture it, put it into any terms that make sense for you, whether it's a song, whether it's a picture, whether it's an anchor, like in Andy's case, that ring. For me, it was, I have this video of kind of the first super successful year I had in sales that I had made for the owners of the company when they came for the review. And now this is way back before, big TVs. You had to rent big TVs. So we rented this big TV and we showed it to them. And afterwards, the CEO came up to me and he says, "You guys are playing at a whole nother level." And that, I remember that moment. I cherish that moment. I still have that VCR. I keep the VCR just to play that once in a while, just to remind myself of what I'm capable of. And you have these anchors. It's like, I have like the book I wrote right in front of me. I have my Tony Robbins autograph right here on my desk. Although, the fire walking stuff, which I've done, it does, kind of change your belief system. But a lot of us aren't going to be doing that every day. But what we can do every day is really kind of come up with small little systems to get us to budge out of our comfort zone and expand our comfort zone to live the life that we really want. And in sales, that's what it's all about. It really is, because so many of us are uncomfortable. Even in the course, I ask everybody to be the squeaky wheel. Ask the question. Send me your examples. Complain. Tell me what you need. Don't be shy, because it's all about getting what you need, getting feedback on what you're doing, getting better answers, trying something new. And what you heard in there was that taking feedback was one of the scariest things. And what happens is people take it personally instead of taking it as improvement. Now, once you make that leap, your life will be so much better, because all of a sudden you can ask for feedback and understand that it's not a personal attack, but a helping hand. If you can make that shift, there's no stopping you. And most people can't and cry or get their feelings hurt because we are programmed not to take this stuff. Nature over thousands of years has burned into our brain of survival, not these analytical skills that help us actually move forward. So I hope that's been helpful. Please check out the courses at b2brevenue.com. There's the free ebook on how companies are buying. We're halfway through Q2. Are you getting all the meetings you can stand? The people in the course they're just booking them up. People are now outsourcing it and just filling their calendar up with qualified meetings. I show you how to do it in a humanistic way, authentic way, a real way, instead of this pitching, spamming, cold calling way that just doesn't seem to work anymore, does it? If it's working for you, stick with it. I'm not trying to downplay anybody's approach. If what you're doing is working, stick with it. And if you just want to learn about how to be better at closing the complex sale, check out the training courses. There's a free one on LinkedIn as far as building a great profile. LinkedIn's changed recently, so like your background image has been resized. So you can just Google that. It'll show you how to resize it. You can go to Canva and redo yours, having something that represents kind of either what you do or who you are, or just some kind of symbol other than the default would be helpful there. Also, there's a free course. Well, it's free with the coupon at Nudge. It's the coupon code. Make sure you use it. There's no refunds if you make a mistake. I don't have time for that. Just make sure you put the coupon in and the balance is 0, hit submit. If the balance isn't 0, don't hit submit. And you get to learn about how I use Nudge to basically find out my network and how I can get into accounts the easiest way through my network. And also it keeps track of my account-based sales and marketing approach. Also, make sure you're checking out gong.io. They're doing great stuff. If you are cold calling, they've got the research about what's working and what's not working. And if that's their approach, well, everyone's approach is very direct. And the direct approach can work if you've got market knowledge and the problem well understood. But what ends up happening is a lot of people, you don't have brand recognition. No one knows what you're doing. They're trying to get rid of you. And that's what start the conversation, get the meeting is all about. The price may go up at the end of May. I haven't decided yet. The office hours are becoming so valuable that them in and of themselves are what's worth the whole course. Also, if you know somebody who wants to get into B2B sales, check out the Sales Development Rep Grad School course. This course is all about that first year of how to get into business-to-business sales, whether you've sold business to consumer and retail or any other role, customer service maybe, or you're just out of college and you want to get into business-to-business sales, because that's where it's at, guys. That's where you're making the money. Everybody's telling me, oh, yeah, there's all these other things. And everyone's kind of thinking they have the choice of either being a barista or being a grad student. Well, there's something else you could do. You could be a business-to-business sales development rep. And the opportunity is 53,000 openings in the United States alone. Just check that out in Indeed. You can just Google it yourself. There's 7,000 companies on LinkedIn looking for sales development reps. You can check that out for yourself. So the demand is there. The supply isn't. And the problem is that people are going in completely unprepared, not knowing what the job is, and hiring managers are interpreting that as you're not capable. What the course does is take you through that first year, everything you need to know. And you get to take office hours once a week for an hour to ask any question you want, get feedback, see what other people are doing, what tools they're using, what approaches they're using, what's working. But the course takes you all the way through that first year to get you to become an account exec. That's the next stage up, where you're making, over $100,000 base, 200 to 300K target, and making the big money. And then you take the closing the complex sale course and learn how to crush it there. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Thanks for everyone who's connecting with me on LinkedIn, sharing my content on LinkedIn. I super appreciate it. And let me know any questions. So I got the other Sales Questions podcast, B2B Revenue podcast, and a new one. Yeah. Career strategy or career advice podcast. Check that out if you have any career questions. It's more general. It's not just sales. It's kind of, just general career strategy and how to handle certain issues. And it's kind of a rant, but I'd love to have people on as an interview to go through particular problems anonymously. If you'd like, that's fine. That's it. Make sure you go get Andy's book, Reach, over where books are sold. Thanks for listening.